President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I said the Senate had a lot of hard work to do in order to address several critical priorities before the end of the year. When the month began, America knew we had to avoid a government shutdown. We had to approve our annual defense bill. We had to preserve the full faith and credit of the United States and take action on Build Back Better before Christmas, as well as deal with voting rights. It is now December 8th, and the Senate is making very good progress on all these priorities. It was a big, big agenda, and we're clearly not through with it, but we are making good progress, and there is clearly light at the end of the tunnel on debt ceiling and the defense bill, based on the agreement Leader McConnell and I came to and the House's action last night. Last night, let me go over those details. The House of Representatives sent us two important pieces of legislation. One of them is a compromise version of our annual defense bill, which I expect will earn bipartisan support in this chamber in the coming days. I want to thank my colleagues, especially Senator Reid and Ranking Member Inhofe, and all of my colleagues who worked to shape this legislation, for helping us make sure we pass a bipartisan defense bill this year, as we have done for decades. The second bill they sent us will enable the chamber to swiftly address the debt limit, sparing our country from the calamity, and a calamity it would have been, of a first-ever default on our national debt. This fast-track process was included in a bill that will also provide critical protections for Medicare funding and preventing slashes in that very important funding to so many seniors, and waive the pay-go rule to avoid harmful cuts. Last night, I took the first procedural step to advance this legislation, setting up a cloture vote to take place as soon as Thursday. Once our proposal is approved by the Senate, we'll be able to address the debt limit in this chamber with a simple majority vote, which is exactly what Democrats have been seeking for months, what I've been asking for at this podium time after time after time. I want to thank the Republican leader for his help working with us to find a responsible path that avoids partisan brinksmanship. Democrats have always said that the Senate should be able to raise the debt limit without resorting to a convoluted, lengthy, and risky reconciliation process. And under our plan, we won't have to do that. Democrats have also said repeatedly that the responsible thing to do is raise the debt ceiling. Both Democrats and Republicans voted for the spending increase. So we've said repeatedly that we're ready to shoulder this burden, even if our Republican colleagues are not going to be able to. It now looks like we'll be able to do that, to have 50 Democrats vote responsibly, doing what's good for the nation, avoiding catastrophe by raising the debt ceiling to pay the debts we have already incurred, just like any household must do. This agreement we've secured is the responsible path forward. No gamesmanship on the debt limit means no default on our sovereign debt and the calamity that would cause. And again, I thank my Republican colleagues and Leader McConnell. We have had fruitful, honest, and good discussions over the last several weeks to come up with this proposal. We're not over the finish line yet, but I want to thank all my colleagues for working in good faith to move forward on this responsibility that must be addressed in the coming days. Soon, we'll be able to cross off another major item off our December to-do list, and there are more to roll up our sleeves and get working on. They are so important. Build Back Better. So in the first few days of December, we've successfully avoided a government shutdown. We've cleared the path, hopefully for addressing the debt limit. And as I mentioned, I'm optimistic that NDAA will soon be settled. None of these are easy accomplishments, but we are clearing the path for Democrats to turn to our biggest domestic priority of the year, passing President Biden's Build Back Better Act before Christmas. Later today, 4 Senate committees will release the final text of their portions of Build Back Better, along with CBO scores for each, as required by the reconciliation process. Those 4 committees are Commerce, Small Business, Banking and Housing, and Veterans Affairs. In the meantime, I continue to hold daily conversations with my Democratic colleagues, with the White House, with the Speaker, and House colleagues. We continue to make good progress, and we are still on track to vote on a final product before Christmas. The sooner we can pass Build Back Better, the better off American families will be as we start the new year. This bill has always been about a simple goal: cutting costs for working and middle-class families. People are complaining about higher costs. They're right to do that. This bill actually lowers costs in many different areas and will help families who are trying to make ends meet and stretch those dollars. Let me give you some examples. Families are still struggling to pull themselves out of a once-in-a-century economic crisis brought about by COVID. They want to pay less for things like health care, prescription drugs, child care, some of the biggest costs average middle-income and working families have. They want us to find ways to make that happen, and that's exactly what Build Back Better does. America, you want lower costs? Tell your senators to vote for Build Back Better. If we invest in American families, then we make it easier for them to work, to be productive, to flourish in society. And that makes our country stronger and lowers costs in the long term. One of the great problems, we're told, is shortage of workers. One of the greatest reasons for the shortage of workers is lack of good child care. People can't go to work if they have to look after their kids. And in this post-COVID era, a lot of the patterns that used to happen don't happen anymore. Making child care affordable will help bring people back to work, get our economy humming along again, and deal with some of the bottlenecks in certain areas, in certain industries, which is creating inflation. Helping families afford child care, of course, saves parents money, but it goes a long way to alleviating our labor shortage. If parents don't have to worry about how they'll keep their kids safe during the day, they'll have greater flexibility to re-enter the workforce and increase the country's output. That lowers inflation. In the long term, everyone wins: kids, parents, employers, and the entire economy. This single investment alone is enough reason to keep pushing Build Back Better, but there are so many. One of the greatest costs we face is prescription drug costs. That's what families complain about above all. This bill goes a long way to making prescription drugs cost less. Another great cost people are complaining about: the rising costs of housing. This bill puts more money into housing to both rehabilitate housing that is deteriorated, putting them back into the marketplace in a real way, and creating new housing. It'll reduce the dramatic increase in housing costs. So you want to talk about inflation, you want to talk about people having to pay more. This bill is an antidote in so many areas. I've mentioned child care, health care, and housing, just to name a few, but there are many others as well. So we're going to keep working and getting this bill done. It is so important to working families and to America. To working families, less expenses, easier to make that dollar stretch when they sit down Friday night after dinner and say, how are we going to pay the bills this week? To America, relieving bottlenecks and making sure that our economy hums along at a rapid rate where people are getting good wages, but the bottlenecks caused often by COVID are reduced.